All right, welcome back, everybody. I'm super excited to get this going. Every year I get excited about the NFL draft, and this year has one of the best quarterback classes that I've ever seen. I'm so hyped, guys. If you don't know, I played quarterback in college at Taylor University. I've always been obsessed with QB stats and passing mechanics and all those different things. I love diving deep into each prospect. And, in our last video, we talked about different, markets as far as where they end up, those strategies and factors on what helps us, decide whether we want to invest in a player or not. Here we are pre-draft, and there's some stats that I look at before they go into the draft that kind of helps me prepare to know who I'm looking at, who am I excited to see get drafted to certain teams, who is worth my money. I like to do this research before the draft, focus on some stats. And some stats that I look at are strength of schedule, passing attempts, completion percentage, sacks per attempt, and I think that's an extremely important stat. I think it's one of the greatest stats that translates to the NFL. How many sacks are you taking for how many throws that you're getting out of there? Touchdown to interception ratio really kind of just helps with, decision making. I think that stat is overrated a lot of the times, but, in an overview of a player, it kind of says, hey, they protect the ball and they get the ball in the end zone. And then, I'm not an expert. I don't claim to be an expert. So I highly, value the stat of the ESPN passer rating. I've seen the formulas before. They're pretty, telling of how good a quarterback is in comparison to other quarterbacks. I think it's always tough when you look at guys in different seasons and compare their ESPN passer rating. But, within a season, I think the ESPN passer rating is a great stat to look at. So again, I took 40 quarterbacks that are all eligible for the draft this year. I kind of narrowed that list down to 20. And then I looked at all of these stats and I ranked them, each of these stats, and I kind of get what's called an overall ranking that I look at. Now, that doesn't mean it's like, I think that these guys are the best in this order. It's just kind of like their stat ranking. It just so happens that this first quarterback we're going to talk about ranked 9th on those stat rankings, and I also have him ranked 9th in my quarterback rankings, and that is Arkansas quarterback Feleipe Franks. Feleipe Franks is a tried and true quarterback in the SEC, which I hold higher than all the other conferences in football. I'm a Big Ten guy. I love my Big Ten, but SEC football is superior. I believe that. He actually ranked 10th in all of SBS. Arkansas had the 10th ranked strength of schedule. So he's going against great competition all year long. He started 37 games in the SEC. The dude has been through a lot. He actually suffered a season-ending injury when he was at Florida and ended up transferring to Arkansas, and he had a great year at Arkansas. Daniel Jeremiah actually had high praise for his season in Arkansas, said he was much improved, much better decision-making, and much more decisive, both of which obviously translate great into the NFL. He's got a great arm. Some of the knocks on him is that he can be a bit of a statue in the pocket, so he's going to need to go somewhere in the NFL that has a solid offensive line. He took a lot of sacks in college. In fact, I think that's why I don't have him higher on my list. Is because of all the sacks. Out of the 20 quarterbacks, I narrowed it down so he was dead last in sacks per attempts. You can blame an offensive line for a lot of things, but being dead last in something, that's going to have some ownership on that quarterback. I'd like to see him get in a spot where he's very well protected if he ever gets an opportunity, but also he needs to improve vastly on getting the ball out. Accuracy doesn't seem to be an issue with him. He throws a pretty good ball. It's just, in those moments of get the ball out or take a sack, he takes a sack. You got to do that less. But he completed 68.6% of his passes this year. That ranks him 6th among these quarterbacks. He was 7th in ESPN passer rating, which again, I hold that stat very highly. The dude's huge. He's 6'6", 228. Like, man, this guy's a player. He's got an NFL body. He had a pretty good Senior Bowl showing. How they do in the Senior Bowl is not something that I hold in high regards, but it is always interesting to me. He had a good showing. He was 9 of 16, 122 yards and a touchdown in the Senior Bowl. He's kind of middle of the pack in terms of the touchdown to interception ratio as I look at this quarterback group, but he only threw 4 interceptions. 17 passing touchdowns is not a great feat, but only 4 interceptions, that's pretty impressive. He started 37 games. He only had 4 games with multiple interceptions. Playing quarterback myself, I had games, obviously you want to have 0 interceptions, but stuff happens, right? Tip passes, bad decisions. You could have a day where you complete 85% of your passes and have an interception based off one bad decision. I think it says a lot in how you come back after an interception and how you finish the game. So the fact that out of those 37 games, he only had 4 games with multiple interceptions, that says a lot about a quarterback. Something else I always look at when I'm trying to decide if a player is worth my money or not, the ceiling and the floor, right? So if you're looking at somebody, I think back to Josh Rosen. It was like, his ceiling is he looks like an NFL quarterback, so he could be an average NFL quarterback. His floor is he was subpar at UCLA. So, that's a pretty low floor for me. So I didn't invest a single cent into Josh Rosen until he got, traded out of Miami, because this stuff's like dirt cheap right now. You can buy some of his, Prism and Optic Rookies and dollar bins sometimes. So, I think of risk reward a lot when I look into, is this player worth my money? And so when I look at the ceiling of Feleipe Franks, I'm kind of blown away by it. In the SEC, mind you, he played an SEC schedule. He had 13 games with over 70% of completion percentage. Like, that's a lot. 70% was always my goal as a quarterback. And it's a rare thing to hit that, honestly. So for the fact that he hit it, 13 times, that's quite a feat. And to go on top of that, 6 of those were against ranked teams. And something else I think of, when you look at an SEC schedule and you kind of compare, Arkansas is not in that top half of the SEC. They might be right there in the middle of the pack. But they're playing against very good teams, ranked teams. And so he had 6 games against ranked teams that he completed 70% of his passes. Again, he's not necessarily an immobile guy. He's got the frame. He's actually got the athleticism to run for first downs here and there. It's not, when I say he's a statue in the pocket, I kind of meant, in terms of he takes a lot of sacks instead of scrambling. But when he runs on designed runs, or he does decide to get out of the pocket, he's athletic enough to add that little extra that a lot of quarterbacks don't have. So I think that's going to play into his positives and his ceiling. When we look at the floor, he completed 52.8% of his passes and 2 interceptions. But that was against Georgia, number 4 ranked Georgia at the time. So that's his worst game in his career against a very, very, very good Georgia team. And 52.8% is bad, but it's not like, this guy never has a chance bad, right? He's overcome an injury. He had that big injury. He came back extremely strong in Arkansas. I think there's a lot of upside to Feleipe Franks. I see him going in later rounds, 5, 6, 7. But again, if he hits one of those big markets that we talked about in the first video, he might be worth keeping an eye on. He might be worth my money. He's also somebody that I'm going to keep my eye on when preseason rolls around. Even if he gets one of those QB3 spots, gets those preseason roster spots, he's big enough that he's going to look impressive when he's back behind an NFL line. He's got a good enough arm, and he can make all the throws that he really could light some people up in preseason and kind of earn a spot somewhere else, even if he doesn't make his preseason team. So I think he's going to be a guy that makes a roster somewhere in the NFL this year. Keep your eyes on Feleipe Franks.